Excuse me, I just wanted to see my father's face, Yara Okoye declared, her voice slicing through the elegant hum of a Charleston wedding, her finger pointing at the stunned groom, Thomas Rutherford, as her mother, Jumoke Okoye, sat veiled in white silk among the guests, her presence a silent thunderbolt. The bride, Evelyn Harper, froze in shock, her lace gown trembling as the crowd gasped, their whispers erupting into chaos. What truth could unravel such a perfect moment? Where are you watching from, dear listeners, and what do you think lies behind Yara's bold claim? This is a story of courage, secrets, and redemption that will grip your heart. Subscribe to our channel for the latest stories that uncover hidden truths, and share in the comments where you're tuning in from. Your guesses about what happens next might just surprise you. The Charleston gardens shimmered under a canopy of magnolias, their petals catching the soft glow of string lights that swayed in the evening breeze. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and champagne, a symphony of elegance orchestrated for the wedding of Thomas Rutherford, a millionaire whose name adorned hospital wings and charity galas. Guests in silk gowns and tailored suits murmured over crystal flutes, their laughter blending with the delicate strains of a string quartet. At the altar, Thomas stood resolute, his silver hair gleaming, his bespoke tuxedo a testament to his untouchable status. Beside him, Evelyn Harper, radiant in a gown of ivory lace, smiled with the confidence of a woman who had choreographed her triumph. But beneath the perfection, a fault line waited, unseen, until a single voice cracked it wide open. Yara Okoye, 16 and small but unyielding, stepped forward from the edge of the aisle, her second-hand emerald dress clinging to her frame like a defiant flag. Her hands clutched a creased photograph and a worn letter, their edges softened by years of quiet hope. Her voice, trembling yet piercing, cut through the quartet's gentle chords like a blade through silk. "Excuse me, I just wanted to see my father's face." The words landed like a thunderclap, silencing the crowd. Forks clinked against porcelain, a violinist's bow faltered, and every eye, over 100 of Charleston's elite, turned to her. Whispers erupted, sharp and venomous. "Who is she? Look at that dress, second-hand, shameful." A woman in a wide-brimmed hat hissed, "Call security, this is indecent." At the back of the garden, seated among the guests, Jumoke Okoye rose, her face half-veiled by a delicate white-embroidered shawl. Her presence had gone unnoticed, a shadow among the glittering crowd, until now. Her eyes, dark and steady, mirrored Yara's, carrying a quiet fire that needed no words. Evelyn's smile vanished, her face contorting with fury. "Who is this child?" she shrieked, her voice sharp as shattered glass. "Someone get her out! Who let this street thing into my wedding?" Yara stood her ground, her feet planted, her gaze locked on Thomas. "You're my father," she said, her voice cracking but resolute, holding up the letter. "This is from my mother, Jumoke Okoye. You knew her. You loved her once." The garden gasped, a collective intake of breath that seemed to still the air. Thomas blinked, his composure faltering, his hand still entwined with Evelyn's. "If you're looking for a father, you're mistaken," he snapped, his voice cold but unsteady. "There's no one here by that title for you." But when Yara extended the photograph, a faded image of a younger Thomas, his arm around Jumoke on a Charleston pier, their laughter frozen in time, his eyes betrayed him. His body stiffened, one hand rising to his chest as if to steady a heart that remembered what his words denied. Jumoke stepped forward, her shawl slipping slightly, revealing a face both fierce and weary. "You knew me, Thomas," she said softly, her voice a low tide pulling at the past. "You loved me, at least for a moment." Evelyn's scream shattered the silence. "No! This is a scam!" she cried, her diamonds glinting as she pointed at Yara. "You think you can just walk in and claim Thomas Rutherford? This is my day." Her bouquet hit the ground, petals scattering like broken promises. Guests stood, mouths agape, heads swiveling between Yara, Jumoke, and Thomas. A man in a suit muttered, "She smells like bus terminals," while another whispered, "Call security now." But Yara didn't flinch, her jaw set, her eyes fixed on Thomas. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice steady now, "until you look me in the eyes and tell me I don't matter." Thomas's gaze locked on the photograph, his fingers brushing its edge as if it might burn. A single tear traced his cheek, betraying the wall he'd built over decades. "That woman," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "That was her." Jumoke's voice was calm but unyielding. "She was my mother too," she said, stepping closer, her shawl now a quiet banner of her presence. "She told me who you were, Thomas. She never stopped hoping you'd remember." The guests fell silent, even the birds seeming to pause. Evelyn's face twisted with rage. "You cry for her now at our wedding?" she shouted. "This is not happening." She stormed off, her heels cracking against the stone path, leaving the ceremony in ruins. Thomas stood frozen, the photograph shaking in his hand, the weight of his choices crashing like a collapsing roof. Yara remained, her small frame a seismic force, her eyes never leaving his. Jumoke stood beside her, her presence a quiet storm, her shawl now draped over her shoulders like a mantle of truth. The guests buzzed, a hive disturbed, but their whispers couldn't touch the moment. Security men approached, their steps cautious, but Thomas raised a hand. "Don't," he said, his voice hoarse. "Let her stay." He turned to Yara, his eyes bloodshot, his voice breaking. "You came for my face," he said. "You have it." The garden, once a stage for perfection, lay shattered, its elegance undone by a girl's courage and a woman's unyielding truth. Yara and Jumoke stood together, their hands brushing, their presence a crack in the polished marble of Thomas's world. They had come for a moment, and in that moment they had claimed a truth that would not be buried again. The Charleston dusk draped the park in a soft amber veil, the kind that made even the ordinary seem sacred. The air carried the faint scent of blooming jasmine and the distant hum of cicadas, weaving a quiet symphony that felt both intimate and vast. At a weathered wooden picnic table, scarred by years of sun and rain, Jumoke Okoye sat with her daughter Yara, their silhouettes sharp against the fading light. Across from them was Thomas Rutherford, his silver hair catching the last glimmers of the sun, his tailored jacket replaced by a simple navy sweater. The table held a modest spread, take-out boxes of fried chicken, golden cornbread, and a small bottle of hot sauce that gleamed like a ruby in the twilight. No one spoke at first. The silence was not empty, but heavy, laden with the weight of a past too long buried and a present too fragile to name. Jumoke's hands rested on her lap, her fingers tracing the hem of her cotton blouse, a habit from years of steadying herself through storms. Yara, 16 and fierce despite the exhaustion in her eyes, clutched the same creased photograph she'd held at the wedding, a snapshot of a younger Thomas and Jumoke on a Charleston pier, their laughter frozen in a moment that now felt like a myth. The letter, brittle and yellowed, lay folded beside her, its words a tether to a truth she'd carried alone for too long. Thomas's gaze flickered between them, his usual polished confidence replaced by something raw, almost breakable. He cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the quiet. "I thought a restaurant would be too much," he said, gesturing to the food. "This felt honest." Jumoke's eyes met his, steady and unyielding. "Honest," she repeated, the word hanging like a challenge. "That's a new choice for you." Her voice was calm, but it carried the edge of a woman who had learned to measure trust in teaspoons. Yara glanced at her mother, then at Thomas, her jaw tight. She hadn't wanted to come, hadn't wanted to sit across from the man who'd denied her existence only a day ago. But Jumoke had insisted, not with words but with the quiet resolve in her eyes, the kind that had raised Yara through years of double shifts and whispered lullabies. Thomas opened a container, the scent of fried chicken mingling with the evening air. "I remembered you liked things spicy," he said to Jumoke, nodding at the hot sauce. A faint smile tugged at her lips, not warm but acknowledging. "You remembered something," she said. "That's a start." Yara broke off a piece of cornbread, crumbling it between her fingers. "Mom never talked badly about you," she said, her voice low but piercing. "Even when we had nothing, she didn't." Thomas's hand paused over his fork, his eyes dropping to the table. "I didn't deserve that," he murmured. The conversation unfolded slowly, like a wound being unwrapped. Thomas spoke first, his voice halting. "When I met you, Jumoke, I was 23, full of dreams I thought I could control. You were different, fearless. You laughed like the world couldn't touch you. He paused, his fingers tightening around his paper cup. My parents saw you and saw a scandal. They said you weren't suitable. I listened to them. Jumoke's expression didn't soften. You mean they saw a black woman and saw trouble, she said, her tone flat but razor sharp. Thomas winced, the truth landing like a stone. They didn't say it outright, but yes. And I was weak. I walked away. Yara's eyes burned, her voice rising. You left her pregnant. You left me. Thomas's face crumpled, the lines deepening around his eyes. I didn't know, he said too quickly. Jumoke leaned forward, her voice steady but cold. I wrote to you, Thomas. I called. I left messages with your secretary, your cousin, anyone who'd listen. You knew enough to choose silence. The accusation hung between them, undeniable. Thomas's hands shook slightly as he set down his cup. Maybe I did, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I didn't want to know. The park seemed to hold its breath. A breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the faint quack of ducks from a nearby pond. Yara pushed the photograph toward him. This was her favorite, she said. She'd look at it when she thought I wasn't watching. She'd smile, then cry. Thomas took the photo, his fingers brushing the edges as if it might dissolve. In it, Jumoke's hair was loose, her smile wide as she leaned into him on the pier, the ocean a blur behind them. I remember that day, he said, his voice thick. We talked about constellations, about naming a star after you if we ever... He trailed off, unable to finish. Jumoke's eyes softened, but only slightly. She kept that photo by her bed, she said. Not for you, but for her. For what she thought love could be. Yara's voice broke in. She worked double shifts as a nurse, Thomas. Her back hurt so bad she'd lie on the floor after dinner. But she still made sure I had books, clothes, a chance. Thomas's eyes glistened, a single tear escaping. I can't undo that, he said, but I'm here now. Here now, Jumoke echoed, her tone neither forgiving nor dismissive. What does that mean, Thomas? A dinner? A check? Or something real? He leaned back, the weight of her question pressing against him. I don't know yet, he said, but I want to find out, if you'll let me. Yara looked at her mother, then back at him. It's not about letting you, she said. It's about whether you show up when it's hard. They ate in silence for a while, the crunch of chicken and the soft clink of forks against paper plates, the only sounds. The sky darkened, stars beginning to prick through the dusk. Jumoke broke the quiet. She used to douse everything in hot sauce, she said, a small laugh escaping. You learned quick, didn't you? Thomas smiled, the first genuine one of the night. If it didn't sting, it wasn't food, he said, mimicking her old phrase. Yara's lips twitched, a reluctant smile breaking through. As they packed up, Thomas hesitated, then spoke. I don't expect trust, not yet, but I'd like to talk again. Somewhere quiet, like this. Jumoke nodded, her expression unreadable. We'll see, she said. Yara stood, brushing crumbs from her jeans. Don't make promises you can't keep, she said, her voice firm but not unkind. Thomas met her gaze, his eyes steady. I won't, he said. They walked back to the parking lot, their steps uneven but aligned, like dancers learning a new rhythm. The stars above watched in silence, witnesses to a moment that was neither an ending nor a beginning, but something in between, a fragile thread woven from truth, pain, and the tentative hope of something new. As Jumoke and Yara drove away, the photograph lay on the table, a quiet reminder that some stories, once unearthed, refuse to stay buried. The Charleston morning broke with a relentless hum, not of cicadas, but of notifications. Phones buzzing, screens glowing with the viral video that had turned Yara Okoye's quiet courage into a public spectacle. The grainy footage, captured by a wedding guest's trembling hand, looped endlessly across social media. Yara, her emerald dress stark against the pristine aisle, pointing at Thomas Rutherford, her voice clear and piercing. I just wanted to see my father's face. Behind her, Jumoke Okoye, veiled in white silk, rose like a shadow coming into focus, her presence amplifying the moment's weight. Headlines screamed across digital banners. Mystery girl crashes millionaire's wedding. And Charleston elite shocked by paternity claim. The city, usually content with its charm and secrets, churned with gossip, and Jumoke felt the weight of every stare as she stepped outside her modest motel room. She shielded Yara as best she could, pulling the curtains tight against the world's prying eyes. The motel, with its flickering neon sign and threadbare carpets, was no sanctuary, but it was theirs for now. Yara sat cross-legged on the bed, her phone dark, refusing to scroll through the comments that dissected her dress, her skin, her audacity. "They don't know us," she said, her voice steady, but her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt. Jumoke nodded, her own hand steadying a cup of lukewarm coffee. "They never did," she replied, her tone a mix of resolve and weariness. She'd faced scrutiny before, years ago, when whispers of her relationship with Thomas had reached his family's ears. But this was different. This was her daughter, her heart laid bare for strangers to judge. Outside, the world refused to stay quiet. A news van parked across the street, its antenna glinting like a predator's eye. A reporter, microphone in hand, lingered near the motel office, hoping for a glimpse of the wedding crasher. Jumoke's phone buzzed with messages from unknown numbers, journalists offering interviews, bloggers promising exposure. She deleted them all, her jaw tight, but one call stopped her cold. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice was warm, measured, like a hearth after a long walk in the rain. "Jumoke, this is Yara Rutherford, Thomas's sister." Jumoke froze, her grip tightening on the phone. "I saw the video," Eleanor continued. "I didn't know about Yara or you, not until now, but I remember you, and I need you to know you're not alone in this." Eleanor's words were a lifeline, unexpected and fragile. She offered her guest house, a quiet haven tucked behind a hedge of blooming camellias in a Charleston suburb untouched by the media's glare. "It's private," she said. "No cameras, no questions, just a place to breathe." Jumoke hesitated, her instinct to protect Yara warring with the exhaustion of running. Yara, listening silently, nodded once, her eyes meeting her mother's. "Let's go," she said, her voice soft but firm. They packed their few belongings, a duffel bag, the photograph, the letter, and left the motel under the cover of dusk, slipping past the news van like ghosts. The guest house was a world apart from the motel's stark walls. Cream-colored walls glowed under soft lamplight, and the air smelled of lavender and polished wood. A vase of fresh tulips sat on a small table beside a quilt folded with care. Eleanor greeted them at the door, her silver-streaked hair pulled back, her smile gentle but not pitying. "You must be Yara," she said, extending a hand. Yara shook it, her posture cautious but curious. "And Jumoke," Eleanor added, her voice softening. "I never forgot how you made Thomas laugh. He was different with you. Lighter." Jumoke's lips pressed into a thin line. "That was a long time ago," she said, but her tone held no venom, only truth. They settled in, the guest house wrapping them in a quiet that felt like a held breath. Eleanor brought tea, her movements deliberate, as if she understood the fragility of the moment. Over steaming mugs, she spoke of the past, not to excuse Thomas, but to contextualize him. "Our parents were rigid," she said, her eyes distant. "They saw the world in straight lines, wealth, status, control. When Thomas brought you home, Jumoke, I was 18, too young to understand fully, but I saw how he changed, and how he broke when they pushed you away." Jumoke's fingers tightened around her mug. "He chose to break," she said. Eleanor nodded. "He did, but you and Yara, you're family now, whether he's ready or not." Yara, who had been silent, spoke up. "Why are you helping us?" Her voice was sharp, testing. Eleanor met her gaze. "Because I know what it's like to be erased by this family's rules, and because you, Yara, deserve to be seen." The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through the room. Jumoke's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through. "Thank you," she said, the words simple but heavy. Outside, the media storm raged on. Notifications pinged on Eleanor's phone. Board members demanding Thomas's response. Reporters circling for a statement. Jumoke and Yara stayed offline, but the weight of the world's eyes pressed against the guest house's walls. That night, Yara sat on the porch, the quilt draped over her shoulders, staring at the stars. Jumoke joined her, the photograph in her hand. "They can't take this from us," she said, her voice low. "Not your truth, not your name." Yara nodded, her fingers brushing the photo's edge. "I'm not hiding," she said. "Not anymore." The guest house, with its soft light and Eleanor's quiet strength, became their refuge, a place where the storm could rage but not break them. For the first time, Jumoke felt a flicker of hope, not for Thomas, not yet, but for Yara, for herself, for the family they might carve out of the chaos. The world could watch, could whisper, could judge. But here in this small sanctuary, they were no longer shadows. They were Jumoke and Yara Okoye, and their story was only beginning. The Stokes Hall Community Center stood humbly on Charleston's east side, its chipped paint and crooked sign belying the life pulsing within its cinder block walls. Inside, children's laughter bounced off worn linoleum floors, mingling with the scent of poster paint and old wood. Jumoke Okoye moved through the chaos with quiet purpose, her hands steady as she guided a young girl's brush across a canvas, coaxing a shaky line into a bold curve. The center was underfunded, overworked, and stubbornly alive, a mirror to the resilience Jumoke had carried for years. Yara, her 16-year-old daughter, hovered nearby, her emerald dress swapped for jeans and a paint-splattered t-shirt. She handed a boy a jar of blue paint, her smile tentative but growing, as if she were testing the ground beneath her feet. The media storm still raged outside, but here, amid the chatter and color, they found a fragile refuge. Jumoke had come to volunteer at the urging of Thomas Rutherford, who described the center as Charleston's heartbeat. The work was simple: help kids with art projects, set up for a fundraiser, but it felt like reclaiming something stolen. Each laugh, each smudged fingerprint on paper, stitched a small piece of Jumoke's spirit back together. Yara, initially reluctant, found herself drawn to the children's unfiltered joy. A girl named Kayla, barely 10, tugged at Yara's sleeve, demanding she judge a drawing of a glittery star. "It's messy, but it's mine," Kayla declared, her eyes daring Yara to disagree. Yara laughed, the sound surprising her. "Messy's good," she said. "It means you tried." The fundraiser was a community affair, a patchwork of folding chairs, lemonade stands, and off-key Motown covers by local kids. The air buzzed with purpose, neighbors hauling tables, elders sharing stories over iced tea, teens pretending not to care while stealing glances at the stage. Jumoke strung fairy lights across a makeshift canopy, her movements deliberate, as if each bulb anchored her to this place. Yara helped a group of boys tape posters to the walls, their banter easing the tension she'd carried since the wedding. The center, with its creaking floors and peeling paint, felt like a home they hadn't known they needed. Mid-afternoon, a familiar figure appeared at the entrance, his silhouette framed by the sun. Thomas Rutherford stepped into the fray. No suit, no bodyguards. Just a man in a faded button-down, carrying a foil tray that smelled unmistakably of peach cobbler. Heads turned, whispers rippled, but he moved with a quiet determination, setting the tray on a table cluttered with paper plates. "I remembered," he said to Jumoke, his voice low, almost shy. "You always loved this." Jumoke's eyes narrowed, but a flicker of memory softened her gaze. "You didn't bake it," she said, not a question. Thomas grinned, a rare, unguarded moment. "I watched a baker. Got in the way, mostly." Yara approached, her arms crossed and studying him. "Why are you here?" she asked, her tone sharp but curious. Thomas met her gaze, unflinching. "Because you are," he said simply, "and because I owe it to try." The words landed softly like seeds on fertile ground. Jumoke handed him a string of lights. "If you're staying, make yourself useful," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. Thomas took the lights, his hands clumsy but willing, and joined the effort, looping them over a beam as children darted around him. The afternoon unfolded in small, vivid moments. Jumoke taught Kayla to mix red and yellow into a fiery orange, her laughter echoing as the girl splattered paint on her own cheek. Yara, caught up in the chaos, helped a boy named Trey pin a banner, their banter turning into a playful argument over whether green or blue was the cooler color. Thomas, to everyone's surprise, let a group of kids smear paint on his sleeve, his chuckle deep and genuine. "You're not as stiff as you look," Trey said, grinning. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Don't tell anyone," he replied, and the boy laughed, a sound that cut through the room's hum. As the sun dipped low, casting golden streaks across the center's walls, the fundraiser took shape. Tables groaned under trays of fried okra, collards, and Thomas's peach cobbler. It sent a quiet nod to a past Jumoke had once shared with him. Neighbors gathered, their voices weaving a tapestry of stories, tales of lost jobs, found loves, and the stubborn hope that kept this community standing. Jumoke stood back, watching Yara hand out cups of lemonade, her daughter's shoulders straighter, her eyes brighter. For a moment, Jumoke felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by the possibility of something new. Thomas approached, wiping his hands on a rag. "This place," he said, his voice low, "it's real, not like the rooms I built." Jumoke nodded, her eyes on the crowd. "It's alive," she said. "That's what matters." Yara joined them, her expression softer but still guarded. "You're not off the hook," she told Thomas, her voice steady. "But you showed up." He nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "I'll keep showing up," he said, the promise quiet but resolute. As the event wound down, the fairy lights glowed against the dusk, casting a warm halo over the center. Jumoke and Yara stood side by side, watching the last of the crowd drift away. The peach cobbler was gone, every crumb claimed by eager hands. Thomas lingered, helping stack chairs, his presence neither intrusive nor absent. The air held a fragile peace, not of forgiveness but of beginnings. Jumoke touched Yara's shoulder, her fingers steady. "We're building something here," she said softly. Yara nodded, her eyes on the lights. "Yeah," she said, "something ours." The community center, with its chipped paint and stubborn heart, had become a crucible for their story. It wasn't redemption, not yet, just a seed planted in cracked soil, tended by small acts and shared silences. As they left, the stars above Charleston blinked, witnesses to a moment where pain and possibility met. And a family, fractured but persistent, took root in the chaos. The boardroom of the Rutherford Foundation loomed like a cathedral of polished ambition, its long mahogany table reflecting the cold light of overhead chandeliers. The air was thick with the scent of leather and power, a space where decisions were carved with precision and dissent was buried under decorum. Thomas Rutherford sat at one end, his usual tailored suit replaced by slacks and a gray shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, as if he'd shed the armor of his public persona. Across the room, board members in crisp suits and stern expressions sat like judges, their folders and tablets aligned with military precision. The weight of the viral wedding video hung over them, its echoes reverberating in whispered headlines and donor unease. But it was the unexpected presence of Jumoke Okoye and her daughter Yara that turned the room into a crucible of truth. Jumoke entered first, her dark slacks and simple blouse a quiet defiance against the room's opulence. Yara followed, her 16-year-old frame straight, her eyes sharp as they scanned the faces before her. The board's invitation had come as a surprise, delivered in a cream envelope with the foundation's crest, its tone formal but opaque. Jumoke had hesitated, wary of being a spectacle, but Yara had insisted, her voice firm. "They don't get to talk about us without us." Now, as they stood shoulder to shoulder, the room's silence felt like a held breath, waiting for someone to strike the first blow. The board chair, Harold Grayson, a silver-haired man with a voice like polished gravel, cleared his throat. "Miss Okoye, Miss Yara, thank you for joining us," he said, his tone measured but tinged with unease. "We've asked you here to discuss the recent events and their impact on the Foundation's reputation." Jumoke's lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers resting lightly on the back of a chair. "Events," she repeated, her voice steady but edged with steel. "You mean my daughter's courage and your CEO's truth." A murmur rippled through the board, a few members shifting uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Jumoke and Thomas. Harold adjusted his glasses undeterred. "The Foundation thrives on trust, donor trust, community trust. The public nature of this situation has raised concerns." A woman in a navy blazer, her badge reading Margaret Voss, leaned forward. Your actions, Mr. Rutherford, have made us a tabloid headline. Donors are questioning our stability. Thomas met her gaze, his jaw tight but his voice calm. I've told the truth, he said, for the first time in years. If that's a scandal, then maybe we've been building trust on lies. Yara stepped forward, her presence commanding despite her youth. You invited us here to make yourselves feel better, she said, her voice cutting through the room's formality like a blade. I'm not your prop. I'm not here to clean up anyone's mess. This is my life, my mother's life, not your headlines. The board stilled, her words landing like stones in a quiet pond. Jumoke's hand brushed Yara's arm, a silent anchor, but she said nothing, letting her daughter's truth stand alone. A younger board member, his tie slightly askew, spoke up. Miss Yara, we respect your perspective, but the Foundation's image is at stake. We're considering Mr. Rutherford's suspension to mitigate the damage. Jumoke's eyes narrowed and she spoke, her voice low but resonant. If you want to judge him, judge his work. Judge the millions he's raised, the programs he's built, not the fact that he finally admitted he has a daughter. Thomas looked at her, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, but he remained silent, letting her words carry the weight. Harold folded his hands, his expression unreadable. And you, Miss Okoye, what do you believe should happen? Jumoke's gaze swept the room, unflinching. I believe you're more afraid of the truth than the scandal. You want an image that shines, but you're punishing a man for owning his mistakes. What kind of legacy is that? The room fell silent, the air taut with unspoken tension. Margaret Voss shifted, her pen tapping softly against her folder. You're asking us to overlook disruption, she said. Yara's voice broke the pause, sharp and unyielding. Disruption? I walked into a wedding to see my father's face. I didn't ask for cameras. I didn't ask for your donors to clutch their pearls. If you want to remove him, do it because he can't do the job, not because he's finally trying to be a man. Thomas's eyes glistened, but he held his composure, his hands clasped tightly on the table. The board members exchanged glances, some nodding, others frowning, the room a battlefield of principles and pragmatism. Harold cleared his throat again, his tone softer now. We'll vote in a week, he said. Until then, Mr. Rutherford, we ask you to refrain from public statements. Thomas nodded, his voice steady. I'm not here for appearances. I'm here to work, and to be a father, if Yara allows it. Yara's expression didn't soften, but her eyes held his for a moment, weighing his words. Jumoke stood taller, her presence a quiet force. This isn't about your foundation, she said. It's about what's real. Decide what you stand for. As they left the boardroom, the heavy doors closing behind them, the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Jumoke and Yara walked side by side, their steps echoing in the marble corridor. Thomas caught up, his voice low. You didn't have to defend me, he said. Jumoke's gaze was steady. I didn't. I defended the truth. Yara glanced at him, her voice softer but firm. You said my name in there. That's a start. Outside, the Charleston air was warm, the city's hum indifferent to the battle just fought. Jumoke and Yara stood for a moment, the weight of the room still clinging to them. The board's decision loomed, but in that fleeting pause they felt the strength of their voices, unyielding and unbroken. The truth, once spoken, had a way of reshaping the world, and they were no longer just shadows in its light. The east wing of the Stokes Hall Community Center thrummed with life, its bare walls transformed into a canvas of possibility. The air was thick with the scent of fresh paint and the chatter of children, their voices weaving a tapestry of hope over the creaking floorboards. Jumoke Okoye stood in the center of the room, her denim overalls speckled with blue and gold, her hands steady as she adjusted a mason jar filled with paintbrushes along the windowsill. This was her vision, her creation, roots and color, a youth art program born from the fire of her daughter Yara's courage. The program's centerpiece, a mural stretching across the back wall, was nearing completion, and today was its unveiling. Jumoke's heart beat with a quiet intensity, as if the room itself held its breath, waiting to speak. Yara, 16 and growing into her strength, moved among the children, her laughter mingling with theirs as she handed out brushes and offered gentle corrections. Her presence, once hesitant, now anchored the space, her emerald eyes catching the light as she helped a girl named Kayla paint a starburst of pink and yellow. The mural was a collective dream, dragons curling around rivers, fists raised beside flowers, and at its heart, a portrait of Yara, painted by Jumoke's own hands. The likeness was striking. Yara's fierce gaze, her curls swept like a crown, her jaw set with the determination that had stopped a wedding. The children had added their touches, handprints, stars, a pair of wings larger than life, each stroke a testament to voices too long silenced. The community gathered as the sun climbed high, spilling golden light through the windows. Neighbors, elders, and families filtered in, their footsteps soft against the worn floors, their eyes wide with anticipation. The room buzzed with murmurs, not of gossip but of awe, as they traced the mural's vibrant edges. Jumoke stood at the front, her hands clasped, her voice steady but resonant. "This isn't just art," she began, her words carrying over the crowd. "It's memory, it's voice. It's what happens when we stop hiding and start building." The applause was soft but warm, a ripple of hands and nodding heads, a few eyes glistening with unshed tears. Thomas Rutherford arrived quietly, slipping in through the back door, his usual polish replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. He carried a stack of folding chairs, setting them down without fanfare, his presence deliberate but unobtrusive. Jumoke caught his eye, her expression unreadable, but she nodded once, an unspoken permission to stay. Yara, noticing him, paused, her brush hovering over a canvas. "You're here," she said, her tone neither warm nor cold, a statement of fact. Thomas met her gaze. "I said I'd show up," he replied, his voice low but steady. He moved to the side, helping a boy named Trey arrange chairs, his hands clumsy but earnest, as if learning a new language. The unveiling began with a child's song, off-key but heartfelt, led by Kayla, who waved her glittery star painting like a flag. The crowd laughed, the sound easing the room's tension. Mrs. Jenkins, the center's director, stepped forward, her voice rich with pride. "Jumoke Okoye didn't just give us a mural," she said. "She gave us a mirror, to see ourselves, our kids, our truths." She gestured to Jumoke, who took a deep breath, her fingers brushing the edge of Yara's painted portrait. "This is for my daughter," she said, her voice breaking slightly, "for her courage, for her light, and for every child who needs a place to be seen." The curtain fell, revealing the mural in its full glory. The crowd gasped, then fell silent, the weight of the artwork settling over them. Yara's painted eyes seemed to watch the room, fierce and kind, surrounded by a garden of color. Blues that flowed like rivers, reds that burned like defiance, golds that glowed like hope. A grandmother in the back wiped her eyes, whispering, "That's my grandson's handprint right there." A teenager pointed to a dragon, saying, "That's mine. It's me." The mural wasn't just art. It was a living story, stitched from the community's heart. Jumoke stepped back, her hands trembling, not from fear but from the weight of what she'd built. Yara stood beside her, her shoulder brushing her mother's, a silent solidarity. Thomas watched from the back, his eyes fixed on the mural, a quiet reverence in his posture. He approached Jumoke later, as the crowd thinned, his voice soft. "This is yours," he said, "all of it. I'm just here to hold the ladder." Jumoke's lips curved, not quite a smile. "You did," she said. "That's enough for now." The event spilled into the afternoon, with children running between tables laden with cornbread and sweet tea, their laughter a counterpoint to the mural's solemn beauty. Jumoke helped Kayla clean paint from her hands, her touch gentle but firm, while Yara debated with Trey over whether his dragon needed more scales. Thomas lingered, stacking plates, his presence a quiet commitment. A neighbor, an older man with a cane, approached Jumoke, his voice thick. "My daughter painted on that wall," he said. "She's been quiet since her mama passed. Today she smiled." Jumoke nodded, her throat tight. "That's why we're here," she said. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the mural, the room grew quieter. Jumoke and Yara stood before the wall, their reflections faint in the window's glass. "It's you," Jumoke said to Yara, her voice soft. "Not just your face, but your strength." Yara's eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "It's you too, Mama," she said. "You made this happen." They stood there, mother and daughter, their hands brushing, the mural a testament to their shared resilience. Thomas approached, hesitant, his hands in his pockets. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice raw, "for letting me see this." Jumoke's gaze was steady. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just keep showing up." He nodded, the promise unspoken but heavy. As the last guest left, the east wing glowed with the mural's light, a radiant wall that held not just paint, but truth, a legacy born from a girl's courage, a mother's love, and a community's embrace. The world outside could wait. Here, in this room, something sacred had taken root, and it would not be undone. The patch of earth behind the Stokes Hall Community Center was a stubborn thing, cracked and weedy, kissed by too much sun and too little care. Yet under the shadow of the radiant mural, it hummed with possibility, as if the painted colors above had seeped into the soil below. Yara Okoye stood at its edge, her boots dusted with dirt, her hands clutching a napkin sketch of what would become Angela's garden, named for Yara's middle name, a tribute to her grandmother's unyielding spirit. The air carried the scent of turned earth and wild mint, and the laughter of children darted like fireflies through the morning light. This was no ordinary garden. It was a sanctuary, a place to grow herbs, vegetables, and memories, where roots, literal and metaphorical, could take hold in a community that had learned to thrive on resilience. Jumoke moved with purpose, her denim overalls streaked with paint and soil, her hair tied back with a scarf that fluttered in the breeze. She directed a group of volunteers, neighbors, elders, teens with reluctant grins, who hauled wheelbarrows of compost and pots of seedlings. Yara, her 16-year-old daughter, knelt nearby, her hands buried in the dirt as she helped a girl named Kayla plant a row of sunflowers. "They follow the sun," Kayla said, her voice bright with conviction, "like people should." Yara smiled, her eyes catching the light, her presence a quiet anchor amid the chaos. The garden was Jumoke's vision, but it was Yara's courage that had inspired it, a living extension of the mural that now watched over them. The community poured in, their hands eager, their voices weaving stories of harvests past and hopes for the future. An elder named Mr. Thompson, his cane sinking slightly into the soil, offered advice on planting basil, his gravelly voice rich with memory. Teens painted wooden signs, Hope, Angela's patch, Little Roots, while children drew butterflies and hearts on the borders, their giggles rising above the clink of shovels. Jumoke paused to survey the scene, her heart swelling as she watched Yara laugh with Kayla, their heads bent close over a seedling. This was more than a garden. It was a promise, a place where broken ground could yield something whole. Thomas Rutherford arrived mid-morning, his arms straining under a heavy bag of compost, his brow damp with sweat. Gone was the polished millionaire. In his place was a man in a faded flannel shirt, his sleeves rolled up, his eyes steady with purpose. He set the bag down, catching Jumoke's gaze. "Thought I'd make myself useful," he said, his voice light but earnest. Jumoke raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You're learning," she said, handing him a rake. Yara glanced over, her expression guarded but softening. "You're here again," she said, her tone testing. Thomas nodded, his hands gripping the rake. "Told you I'd show up," he replied, and the simplicity of his words carried a weight that lingered. Eleanor Rutherford followed, balancing a tray of lemonade and biscuits, her silver-streaked hair glinting in the sun. She moved through the crowd with a warmth that drew people like moths to a flame, pouring drinks and sharing stories. "This is what family looks like," she said to Jumoke, her voice low but firm. Jumoke nodded, her throat tight. Eleanor's presence, like the garden itself, was a bridge between past pain and present possibility. The volunteers worked in rhythm, their hands planting, their voices singing snatches of old songs, the air alive with the hum of connection. Then a shadow fell across the garden. Evelyn Harper stepped from a sleek car, her heels unsteady on the cracked sidewalk, her sunglasses hiding eyes rimmed with fatigue. The crowd stilled, whispers fading as Jumoke straightened, her hands pausing over a seedling. Yara stood beside her, her jaw set, her eyes narrowing. Evelyn removed her sunglasses, her gaze meeting Jumoke's. "I'm not here to fight," she said, her voice softer than the wedding day's fury. "I heard about this place. I needed to see it." Jumoke's expression remained steady, but her voice was firm. "Why?" she asked, the word a challenge. Evelyn's shoulders sagged, her polished facade cracking. "I thought you came to destroy us," she said, glancing at the mural, then at Yara. "But you built something." Her eyes lingered on the garden, on the children planting, on the signs painted with love. Jumoke's voice softened, but her words were clear. "I built this for us, not against you." Evelyn nodded, a tear escaping. "I was scared of being invisible," she admitted. "I thought I had to erase you to matter." Jumoke's gaze held hers. "You don't need to erase anyone to be seen," she said. Evelyn whispered a quiet, "Thank you," then turned away, her heels clicking as she left, the garden's light untouched by her shadow. As the day unfolded, the garden took shape, raised beds brimming with seedlings, a small tree planted in a corner for those lost too soon, a bench beneath it for remembering. Jumoke gathered the group, her voice rising clear and strong. "This garden isn't about crops," she said. "It's about who we are together, our roots, our courage, our home." The applause was long and warm, hands clapping, heads nodding, a few tears falling silently. Yara stood beside her hand brushing her mother's, a silent vow of solidarity. Thomas lingered as the crowd dispersed, helping stack tools, his presence steady but unobtrusive. "You're doing something real," he said to Jumoke, his voice raw. She nodded, her eyes on the garden. "It's for them," she said, gesturing to Yara and the children. "For her." Yara looked at him, her voice soft but firm. "You're here," she said. "That's something." He smiled, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "I'll keep being here," he said. As the sun dipped low, the garden glowed, its soil rich with promise. Jumoke and Yara stood by the tree, their shadows blending with the earth. The mural watched over them, Yara's painted eyes a guardian of this sacred ground. They had planted more than seeds today. They had sown a legacy, one that would grow through cracks, through pain, through the stubborn beauty of community. And in that quiet moment, under the fading light, they felt rooted, not just to the soil, but to each other. The east wing of the Stokes Hall Community Center glowed softly under the spill of late afternoon light, its walls alive with the mural's vibrant colors. The air held the faint scent of drying paint in warm earth, a lingering echo of the garden outside. Jumoke Okoye sat at a small wooden desk in the center's library, a closet-sized room she'd claimed as her own. Before her, a laptop hummed, its screen casting a pale glow on her face as she typed, her fingers steady but deliberate. This was her story, her daughter's story, their story. The wall we needed, a narrative woven from the chaos of a disrupted wedding, the courage of a 16-year-old girl, and the stubborn hope of a community that refused to break. Each word felt like a brick, laid carefully to build something lasting. Not for the headlines that still buzzed outside, but for the children who would walk through these doors long after she was gone. Yara was elsewhere in the center, leading a group of kids in a painting session, her laughter drifting down the hall like a melody. The sound steadied Jumoke, grounding her in the present even as her words reached back to the past. She wrote of Yara's stand in the wedding aisle, her voice cutting through Charleston's elite like a blade through silk. She wrote of the mural, its colors a chorus of voices reclaimed, and of Angela's garden, where roots grew from cracked soil. This was no fairy tale. It was a reckoning, a testament to truth's messy, unyielding power. Jumoke's fingers paused, her eyes tracing a photograph tucked beside the laptop, a faded image of her and Thomas Rutherford on a Charleston pier, young and unafraid, a moment before the world taught them to hide. The library door creaked and Yara stepped in, her jeans speckled with paint, her curls loose and wild. "You're still writing," she said, her voice soft but curious, a brush dangling from her hand. Jumoke nodded, her lips curving slightly. "For you," she said. "For them." Yara leaned against the doorframe, her eyes scanning the room. A single chair, shelves cleared of dust, a sign reading, "The Listening Room," nailed above the door. They're painting sunsets today, she said, a smile flickering. Trevor's is all red, like he's mad at the sky. Jumoke chuckled, the sound warm. Let him be mad, she said, as long as he paints it. Footsteps echoed down the hall, steady and familiar. Thomas Rutherford appeared, his flannel shirt rumpled, a toolbox in hand from fixing a wobbly table in the east wing. He'd been a quiet presence these days, showing up with supplies, brushes, canvas, a Bluetooth speaker that Yara had commandeered for soul music. He didn't hover, didn't demand attention, but his consistency was a language Jumoke was beginning to understand. I didn't mean to interrupt, he said, setting the toolbox down. Just checking if you needed anything. Jumoke's gaze was steady, appraising. You've been bringing a lot lately, she said. Paint, chairs, time. Thomas shrugged, a faint smile breaking through. It's what I can do, he said. For now. Yara studied him, her expression a mix of wariness and something softer. You're not trying to buy us, she said, not a question. Thomas met her eyes, unflinching. No, he said, I'm trying to learn. The words hung in the air, simple but heavy, a promise carved from the rubble of his past mistakes. Jumoke closed her laptop, her hands resting on its warm surface. Keep learning, she said. That's enough for today. The center buzzed with life as evening approached. Children's voices spilled from the east wing, where the mural glowed under soft lights. Yara's painted face watching over the room like a guardian. Outside, Angela's garden thrived, its seedlings stretching toward the sun, its signs, hope, little roots, standing proud. Jumoke walked to the garden, Yara and Thomas trailing behind, their steps falling into an uneven rhythm. The air was warm, scented with basil and the faint tang of soil. A group of kids ran past, their laughter bright, one pausing to tie a shoelace with Yara's help. You're good with them, Thomas said, his voice low. Yara glanced at him, her smile small but real. They're easy to be good with, she said. At the garden's edge, Jumoke paused, her hand brushing a sunflower Kayla had planted. This is what I wanted, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A place where she could be seen. Thomas nodded, his eyes on Yara, who was showing a boy how to stake a tomato plant. She's more than seen, he said. She's changing things. Jumoke's gaze softened, but her words were firm. She's not here to fix your past, she said. She's here to build her own. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I know, he said, and I'm here to help, not to lead. As the sky deepened to indigo, the center quieted, the last volunteers drifting home. Jumoke returned to the library, her fingers tracing the sign on the door. The listening room was her sanctuary, a place for stories, silences, and truths too heavy for the world outside. She opened a drawer, revealing a bundle of letters from her mother, Angela, one unopened, labeled, For When You Forgive Yourself. She didn't read it, not yet, but its presence was a promise, a reminder that healing was a journey, not a destination. Yara joined her, paint still smudged on her cheek, her eyes bright. You finished it? She asked, nodding at the laptop. Jumoke shook her head. Almost, she said. But it's not just mine. It's yours too. Yara's smile was quiet, fierce. Then let's make it loud, she said. Thomas stood at the door watching them, his toolbox at his feet. You're writing something real, he said. Something that'll last. Jumoke met his gaze, her voice steady. It's not about lasting, she said. It's about mattering. Outside, the stars blinked over Charleston, their light soft but unyielding. The garden, the mural, the story. They were roots, not in perfect soil, but in the cracks of a world that had tried to silence them. Jumoke and Yara stood together, their shadows blending with the night, no longer asking to be seen but claiming their place. They had rewritten their story, not with perfection, but with presence, and that was enough to light the way forward. As the story of Jumoke, Yara, and their journey of truth and healing comes to a close, we invite you to reflect on the power of courage and community in rewriting our narratives. What moved you most about their story? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know where you're watching from. Your insights fuel these tales of resilience. We're deeply grateful for your time and presence. joining us in this exploration of human connection. Subscribe to our channel to stay updated on more stories that inspire and challenge. And we look forward to meeting you again in the next chapter of truth and transformation.